Swordy quest. Act live when selecting a emeralds and when selecting a fan fiction story below, there will be a voiceover delay before the story is read out. Emeralds and Obsidian 1. Emeralds and Obsidian 1. A story by Sarah. As I trekked the desert atop my boar, who I named Vernon, I found myself zoning out. I thought of how I'd gotten here in the first place. I remembered braving grasslands, tab bar, camp, act, gaps, commute, top, share, email, but review, gen, settings, music, mute, turn, music, mute, 50, adjust, 10, 20, 60%, 65, accessibility, tab bar, actions. Emeralds and Obsidian 1. Emeralds and Obsidian 2. When selecting when Emeralds and Obsidian 1. A story by Sarah. As I trekked the desert atop my boar, who I named Vernon, I found myself zoning out. I thought of how I'd gotten here in the first place. I remembered braving grasslands, frozen fields and the vast ocean before I was brave enough to enter the desert. Upon doing so and visiting the nearest farm, I was told I should trade for a desert boar rather than the horse I'd been riding up to that point. I was skeptical, as pigs weren't usually what one would think of as a mount. The old farmer had assuaged my doubts. These are much more hardy than any of the equines, he explained. They can go farther without needing a break. They hold up better against the heat, and they'll eat anything. None of the donkeys or horses like the cacti and aloe plants, but these boars don't mind. Feeling that I could trust his assurances, I made the purchase, and it turned out he was quite right. While the horses had needed to stop and rest fairly frequently, Vernon could plod along for quite a long time without getting winded. And just as the farmer had promised, he wasn't affected by the heat. In fact, I felt that I was feeling its effects more than him. The frozen orb I had created up in Damrel protected me from the worst of it, but I still felt very hot and needed to drink a lot of water. And there was nothing to be done about the harsh glare of the sun on the sand, which left me with a pounding headache. Using a rope halter I'd made, I gently turned Vernon's head northward. I wanted to revisit the grasslands and more importantly, get somewhere cooler. Let's go this way, boy, I said, my voice raspy with disuse and thirst. As Vernon obeyed my direction and began to head north, I decided to have a drink and a snack. Once I was full and sated, I offered Vernon one of my cactus fruits which he munched happily. I ran my hand absent-mindedly over Vernon's coarse fur and looked ahead, wondering when the green fields and forests would come into view. Suddenly, Vernon gave a grunt of alarm and stopped so suddenly that my body fell forward onto his neck. I quickly righted myself and looked around, wondering what had spooked him. Then I heard it. Thud, thud, thud. That sound could mean only one thing. We had strayed too near a dragon and it was swooping in to attack. With a resigned sigh, I slid from Vernon's back and drew my obsidian sword. This was the first dragon I'd encountered since I took the portal from Fonatasia to the beyond. I knew that most if not all of the monsters were stronger here, and I shuddered to think what a dragon would be like. Even in Fonatasia, battling a dragon was a long, grueling task. As the beating of the dragon's wings grew louder, sending spikes of pain through my already throbbing head, I looked up. As I'd anticipated, the dragon was a good bit bigger than any of the Fonatasian ones. It was also green. This didn't surprise me as the ones I'd seen before were all different colors, everything from blue to sunshine yellow. Go hide, I cried to Vernon, taking my food bag off of his back before giving him a light slap to get him moving. Without hesitation, he trotted off and disappeared behind a nearby dune. I knew, when this was over, I could call his name and he would come back to me. The dragon landed in front of me, causing the ground to shake and sand to scatter in every direction. At least you have better weapons and armor now, I thought, taking a few steadying breaths. Supposedly, obsidian was the best material for battle tools that could be found anywhere. I'd found it effective against lava monsters and sand snakes, but I wasn't sure how well it would work against this green giant crouching just in front of me, its tail whipping from side to side like a cat readying itself to pounce. Before the dragon could make the first move, I charged. To my surprise, I managed to land a hit and dodge its counter-attack, but my luck didn't last long. The next hour or so felt like it had gone on for days and days. I knew I had little chance of escaping, so I chose to stand and fight. Like all the other monsters I'd fought before, the dragon wasn't about to leave until one of us was killed. I was determined not to let that be me. I needed to stop every so often to catch my breath and drink some water, but the dragon simply waited for me to finish. Why enemies didn't attack while I was taking a break I didn't understand, but I wasn't complaining. At last, the dragon was beginning to slow down and show definite signs of fatigue. I stepped back a ways and ran at it, swinging with all my might. My sword connected, but something unexpected happened. Rather than keeling over dead as all other dragons and monsters before it had done, it froze for a second then lowered its huge head so it was level with me. Confused and terrified, I jumped back, my sword sliding out of my sweaty hands. Then I heard a voice in my head. A voice that, despite its gentleness and obvious femininity, was still strong and intimidating. "You are a strong and worthy warrior, Andromeda," the voice said. It wasn't talking out loud, I heard it in my head. "Since you have bested me, I give you my allegiance. From now on, I will fly you wherever you need to go and fight by your side." I was in shock. I'd heard whispers that dragons in the beyond would submit to an adventurer if they were beaten in a fight, but I laughed it off as idle gossip. What? I gasped, feeling that the strain of the battle had caused me to go mad. The dragon lowered her head and gently nuzzled me. "We are friends now, you and me," she said slowly and clearly. Before I had time to react, I felt my legs give way. I hadn't realized just how tired I was until I collapsed. When I finally awoke, I found a green, cloth-like something stretched over me like a tent, shielding me from the harshness of the early morning sun. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, and looked around wildly. "Good morning, Andromeda," came the dragon's voice in my head. The events of yesterday came rushing back and I laughed, giddy with relief and excitement. "Did you mean it when you said I could ride on you?" I squealed as the dragon lifted her wing. She bowed her head, which I took as assent. I felt a small twinge of guilt. What about Vernon? He's been a good companion. I can't just leave him here. "You could sell him," suggested the dragon. "There's a village quite close to here." "Oh, yes, Hillkeep Village," I remembered. "Will you accompany us to the outskirts so I don't have to walk all the way back here?" Another dip of the head. As I packed up all my belongings and summoned Vernon, I turned to the green dragon who was cleaning the sand from around her scales. "You need a name," I declared. She looked up, her grass green eyes wide with surprise. "A name," she echoed. "Most of your kind don't give us names. They simply ride on us and treat us as tools, nothing more." I shook my head. No, I grumbled. "I'm not like most of my kind. Animals have feelings too, even the horses and pigs. And clearly, you're more intelligent than they are, so of course I want to give you a name and talk to you. You're the one who said we're friends, no?" She looked at me for a moment, then slowly replied. "I said that simply to help you understand. I didn't expect you to take it to heart. Mind you, I'm not complaining. It's nice to be acknowledged as a fellow creature and not treated as an object. I looked hard at her for a few minutes. Her scales shone brightly in the sunlight, making her look like a heap of emeralds on the ground. Emerald, I cried. I'll call you Emerald. She hummed deep in her chest and I could tell she was expressing her liking for the name. I smiled and scratched her head, causing her to hum even more loudly. I turned to see where Vernon was, and found him on his back, rolling back and forth and kicking his legs. He always had to do this before we set off, for the day. I laughed watching him. Why do you always do that? I asked, getting nothing but a playful snort in reply. Come on. We need to go, I urged. Vernon rolled around and got to his hooves, shaking himself to get the sand out of his coat. You're strange, I giggled, hoisting myself onto his back. I left my supplies, save for some food and water, with Emerald. I'll meet you at the edge of town, I told her as she took off, her massive wings snapping open. After Vernon and I had arrived at Hillkeep Village, I directed him to the market. With tears in my eyes, I asked if anyone would be interested in purchasing him. An elderly man with grey hair and beard and kind, brown eyes stepped forward. I can take him off your hands, he offered. Please give him a good home, I begged, barely holding myself together. He observed me with interest. You are not like most travelers, he told me. I know, I agreed. Most of them don't get attached to their mounts like this. You have a kind heart, young warrior, he smiled, putting a gnarled hand on my shoulder. Don't fret, I'll take good care of this handsome boar. Have you given him a name? Vernon, I answered, choking back a sob as the pig looked at me after hearing his name. Vernon is in good hands with me, the man assured me. I can give you a moment to say goodbye if you'd like. I nodded and he walked away so he was at a discreet distance. I flung my arms around Vernon's neck, my cheek pressed against his fur. Thank you for all your help, I whispered. To most people you're just a mount or a dumb animal, but you've been a good friend to me. Vernon grunted and licked my cheek. After pulling myself together, I beckoned to the old man. Did I ever introduce myself? He asked as he took the rope halter from my hands. I don't think so, I answered, wiping my eyes. I'm Arthur, he said, holding out his free hand which I shook. Andromeda, I replied. Well, young Andromeda, if you're ever in the area, feel free to come visit us. I smiled, collected my coins from Arthur and left. Once I'd reached the outskirts of town, I heard the beating of enormous wings and knew Emerald was coming to pick me up. Once she landed, I climbed onto her back, almost quivering with excitement. I can't believe I'm doing this, I squealed as her wings opened. Hold on tight, she advised, launching herself skyward. My shout of mingled fear and exhilaration was lost in the howling of the wind. I watched the ground quickly drop away until it resembled nothing but a three-dimensional map of the desert biome of the beyond. I pointed to the north, hoping Emerald would understand. She immediately began flying in that direction. I was amazed at how smoothly and quickly she could fly. I gave another scream of excitement that the wind snatched away. As we approached the edge of the desert, I asked Emerald to land. I wanted to collect some more cactus fruit and aloe gel before we ventured into the grasslands. As I was harvesting, I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see a long sand snake staring at me. Grabbing my sword, I quickly slew it before skinning it and stripping it of all of its meat. As I was cutting the meat, I threw aside a scrap and saw something out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head just in time to see Emerald snapping a piece of meat out of the air. Laughing, I tossed another piece in her direction. She grabbed it like a frog catching a fly. Giggling like a schoolgirl, I continued to throw meat in her direction, purposely varying the speed and height at which I threw, trying to see if she could catch it all. To my amazement, she only missed one. It flew over her head and landed on the back of her neck. She twisted hither and thither trying to reach it with her tongue, but she couldn't. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. At last, Emerald gave a huff of frustration and dropped onto her haunches. Would you mind getting this thing off of me? She complained. Still laughing, I plucked the piece of meat from her neck and held it in my open palm, from which she snatched it up. I climbed onto her back and looked ahead at the lush fields and lakes that were just north of us. I couldn't wait to see what other adventures we'd have together. Actions homepage. Library. Swordy. Help. Library. When selecting a fanfiction story below, there Emeralds and Obsidian 2. Emeralds and Obsidian 2. A story by Sarah. After a long day of flying, Emerald and I had finally made it to our destination. We were at the small cluster of lakes in the northeast reaches of the Frogget province. I wanted to collect more lake pearls and water, and I felt that I was long overdue for a bath. I slid from Emerald's back, groaning as my stiff legs struggled to hold my weight. My skin had also been rubbed raw by the sharp edges of her scales. After I'm clean, I'll make you a saddle, I declared. I can't ride bareback all the time without losing all the skin on my legs. Emerald dipped her head in agreement. Sorry I didn't warn you about that sooner, young one, she said. Thankfully, now that we were out of the desert and the sun was no longer so bright and hot, her mental voice didn't make my head pound like it had before. As we'd flown together, I discovered that she could not only use words to communicate. She could send me images, sensations and emotions. Unfortunately, it didn't seem that I could talk in her mind, but she understood my words perfectly. On top of that, she had an intuitive grasp of body language, so she usually knew what was going on in my head. I looked around to make sure we were alone. Last time I'd been at these lakes, a giant toad had surprised me right in the middle of my bath. It's quite something to fight a monster while completely naked. Thankfully, no other adventurers had been nearby when that little mishap occurred, otherwise I'm afraid I would have been the laughingstock of the beyond. I'll keep a lookout for you, Emerald assured me. With a sigh of relief, I walked to the edge of the lake. I plucked some leaves from a shrub to use as a makeshift sponge, then looked at my reflection in the calm water. A tired, sunburnt face stared up at me, framed by shoulder-length, strawberry blonde hair. Before I'd set off on this adventure, my hair had been auburn. The eyes, which had taken on the crystalline blue of the lake, showed equal parts exhaustion and an eager sparkle. I removed my clothes, placing them on a half-submerged rock to soak, and dived into the water. Relief washed over me as I broke the refreshingly cool surface. I used the leaves in my hand to scrub at the grime on my skin, then floated on my back. I gazed vacantly at the azure sky, the orange sun just touching the western horizon. Once I felt good and clean, I climbed out. I used a rough stone to wash my clothes, then stood to hang them on a branch. Then Emerald surprised me. If you put them in front of me, I'll dry them for you. I was confused for a moment, but then I remembered. She's a dragon, I chided myself. Her breath is probably warm enough to dry them in about a second. Apostrophe. I spread my clothes out on the ground and stepped aside. Emerald lowered her head and exhaled. I watched with fascination as the water evaporated, the steam mingling with the smoke from her hot breath. A few seconds later, she finished and lay her head on her front paws, gazing at me with the squinty eyes of a contented house cat. I dressed, loving how warm my clothes were. It felt as if they'd been hung in front of a fire to dry. I looked around one more time to make sure we were safe, then lay down next to Emerald. She rolled onto her side, allowing me to snuggle against the flat scales on her belly as opposed to the sharp ones on her sides and back. She placed one wing over me just as she'd done the night before. Too tired to say goodnight, I dropped off. The next morning, I awoke to a blast of chill air. I opened my eyes to find Emerald getting to her feet. "Arise," she exclaimed. "We are not alone." Suddenly wide awake, I jumped to my feet and grabbed my obsidian sword. Hopping toward me was a flame giant toad. The only difference between these and the normal ones in Phronotasia was that, while the regular ones were green, these had angry red flesh. They were also comparatively stronger, but still easy enough to beat. The slimy creature evaded my first couple of attacks. "Blast you, you're not getting away," I snarled. Before too long, the amphibian lay dead in front of me. I went about the normal ritual of skinning and cleaning it, keeping everything that would be useful. Not knowing how much leather I would need to make a saddle for Emerald, I decided to go hunting. I started in the shrubs, but failed to sneak up on the flame imp. Damn it, I exploded as it scampered away. I turned to see Emerald looking at me, her green eyes sparkling with what could only be amusement. "What?" I snapped. A laugh rang out in my mind. It was a surprisingly light, melodic sound for such a large, imposing creature. "Your curses get worse every time something doesn't go your way," she said, making a strange growling noise that I could only assume was dragon laughter. Grumbling, I went hunting again. This time, I managed to sneak up on and kill a flame imp. Upon checking my supplies, I found that I had more than enough leather to create a saddle. "It won't be one of those horrid, heavy things you put on horses, will it?" Emerald asked as I measured her. I shook my head. "I don't have enough experience or skill to make something like that. It'll be light and should move easily with you," I told her. "I just need something to protect me from your scales." After I finished the arduous task, Emerald agreed to let me put the saddle on her. To my delight, it fit perfectly and she said she barely even noticed that it was there. "Heavy and uncomfortable, eh?" I teased, running my hand along Emerald's velvety wing. She winked lazily. I looked at my reflection again, wondering if my hazel eyes had changed color with Emerald so close. I laughed when I saw that they were the same shade of green as her scales. I'd always found it fascinating the way my eyes could change color depending on my surroundings. I felt like a human chameleon. Then I noticed that my skin was still red from the merciless desert sun. Normally I ate the aloe gel, but I'd heard that it was also good for burns. Figuring I'd give it a go, I smeared some on my face and arms. I sighed with relief as I felt the gel cool the irritated tissue. It felt like it siphoned away the inflammation. Emerald bent down to sniff me. "That stuff smells rather odd," she commented. Then she drew her head back, her snout crinkled strangely. Before I could ask if she was all right, she sneezed. Her nose nearly struck the ground with the strength of her sneeze, and a small gout of flame erupted from both nostrils. "Hey, be more careful," I yelped, submerging my arm in the water to quench my smoking sleeve. "Oops," Emerald said casually. "I didn't expect that to happen." Once I'd gotten over the shock of a dragon sneezing, I started to laugh. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a belly laugh that echoed. "Imagine what the other travelers would say if I told them about this," I gasped. "A dragon sneezing, capital I, can't." Emerald snarled, although I could sense her suppressed amusement. "This didn't happen," she said, nudging me playfully with her muzzle. Once I'd pulled myself together, I climbed onto her back. Thankfully, the saddle served its purpose and kept me safe from Emerald's scales. She twisted her neck to look at me. "Where to now, young one?" she asked. I pointed westward to another lake. "That way," I answered, grinning. Close story scroll pop-up. Close story scroll pop 2. The Fighting Lizards. 1. Emeralds and Obsidian 2. 1. Fairies. 1. Fairy Story. A story by Corrine. The sun shines bright over our head, reflecting on Ergoth's Carla scales and myriads of colorful rainbows as we rest on my raft. How did I end up fishing with a dragon in the middle of nowhere is a very interesting and unusual story. But first, I suppose I'd better introduce myself. People call me Fairy. I am a dreamlike construction that travels from world to world, dimension to dimension, depending of where dreams and imagination bring me. Once I was an assassin, running unknown lands in search of her praise. One other time, I was a brilliant necromancer leading an army of ghosts and undead creatures. Always, I live great adventures, gathering all kind of great stories to tell around a campfire. Even though I lived many lives and traveled numerous lands, my appearance rarely changes, although the names people give me may vary. Not particularly tall and rather willowy, I strike a lovely figure if I may say so myself. I'm a fair-skinned, female with big green eyes and lovely golden wavy hair through which my dainty pointy ears may be glimpsed. I normally enjoy wearing forest green tunics with soft leather boots and light leggings for ease of movement and comfort, even though I've also been seen draped in ostentatious black robes trimmed with gold and doubled with purple velvet. I also sometimes enjoy appearing as a cruel and barbaric orc, but the softer appearance usually gets me farther when comes a time to interact with strangers. As you've probably guessed, my actual name is not Fairy, but since it's way too complicated for people to pronounce, after all, I came into being in the land of drams, I'm going to keep it secret for the moment. So, now that you know all you need to about me, let's move on to the interesting subject. I had been sleeping in the Anirium where I originated for a while when, suddenly, I woke up in a grassland. I was so very hungry and the berries I could see in the bushes around me looked absolutely delicious. But first, I had to find out what I was able to do. I couldn't remember anything at this point, unsure of who I was and what I was doing. I decided to focus on myself, examining my skills and abilities. Sitting cross-legged in the soft aromatic grass, I closed my eyes and breathed. Well, that's about time you do anything. I was about to count you for dead. What? My eyes popped open so fast they threatened to burst out of their orbit. A ghostly figure was standing a few meters in front of me, hovering in midair. Its androgynous figure draped in a translucent amethyst robe, long silver hair braided in a complicated fashion. The ghost-like creature didn't look threatening, although the expression they had, as if there was something very smelly right under its pointy nose, was rather unappealing. Who are you? I asked, curious. I might have not mentioned that, but I am very curious. I can't resist exploring trails, entering forbidden rooms or poking at mystery things. I am your spirit guide. I am here to give you tips and clues to help you across your journey. I can also explain all sort of things that you would like to know. I am not sure why fate will leave a small thing like yours the mighty warrior we've been waiting for, but I suppose you're going to have to do since I can't send you back wherever you came from. Well, that's rather unkind, I said. I'm almost certain spirit guides are not supposed to be so unpleasant. The creature in front of me snapped their fingers and a roll of parchment appeared out of nowhere. Glancing sideways at me, my spirit guide carefully unrolled the thing, taking its time. Bowing at me, the spirit guide handed the parchment to me. Here, dear lady, are the rules of conduct of spirit guides, straight from Phonetasia's Spirit Guide Academy handbook. I took the offered piece and examined it carefully from top to bottom and recto verso. I scowled at my guide, narrowing my eyes at them. Were they kidding me? It's empty. The spirit guide grinned at me before the parchment crumbled in my hands. Precisely. Because it doesn't exist. There's no Spirit Guide Academy. There are no rules of conduct nor any stereotypical way I need to act. And I've decided, little lady, that I won't be kind to you until you prove your worth. I don't feel inclined to lose my time with a pseudo-adventurer who's gonna die fighting her first imp. I jumped on my feet, offended. I wanted to strangle that annoying creature, but my hands went through their intangible form, leaving me disappointed. I will not do that, I shouted. I'll show you. If I were you, I'd eat first, trust me, or not, I don't care, it might be useful. True, I was famished. I threw myself at the nearest bush, scaring a small creature away but barely noticing its campering figure and began stuffing myself with the delicious fruit. By the greatest dreaming dreamer, these berries were as amazing as they looked like. Juicy, sweet with just the first hint of bitterness to prick the tongue and leave me wanting for more. And, best of all, they were all perfectly ripe, gorged with sunshine and summer breeze. You eat with the delicacy of the wild boar, young lady, the spirit guide said, appearing once again at my side. Now, it's time for you to gather and save. You can put everything in your inventory bag and try to slay some imp, according that you can move with something other than the subtlety of a yeti. Guess what? I could. Fighting imps wasn't that hard. In fact, the hardest thing about hunting imp was to catch them unaware. The nasty little creatures were frightful and very easily spooked, so when they saw even the shadow of my bow, they ran off. The spirit guide stuck around, commenting on my fighting style, or lack thereof according to their own judgment, teaching me, no matter what, all I needed to know about this new world I had landed in. After a few days of gathering and crafting and hard travel, I arrived inside of a quaint little farm where half a dozen donkeys were grazing next to a lovely pond. You should trade for one of these, the spirit guide said, popping out of the blue as I was enjoying a well-deserved bath. This would spare me from watching you tread along pitifully around the countryside. I'm not treading pitifully, I protested, throwing water at them with not much result. I am simply enjoying the scenery. The countryside is gorgeous and the weather is always so perfect. I'm taking my time, what's wrong with that? Truthfully, I mostly enjoyed pulling their chain. They were so infuriating that I couldn't help myself. I had to do everything I could to irritate them while doing my best to prove them I wasn't a total idiot. I loved to see the incredibility on their faces. I slew, crafted, gathered and solved puzzles nearly as much as I enjoyed watching them rolling their eyes at me as I braided my hair with lake pearls, carved figurines in wood, or stones and took the time to smell the flower patch I came across. One night, I even danced in a meadow under the moonlight just because it felt so good to be alive and free. Beware, silly girl, a trioc is coming and I can assure you it has no intention to dance. This battle occurred the night before I arrived at the Avalon farm. I won, of course. No matter my unfaithful spirit guide's opinion, I'm a decent enough warrior. I might not be mighty strong, but I'm quick and light-footed enough to get through. Fighting does not always require brawn and power. It's also possible to be swift and clever. And, I promise, I have a lot of clever in me. You're a lousy adventurer, little lady, the spirit guide replied, and I advise you to get to donkey. This will spare my mental health since the poor animal will at least have the sense to get you to the next destination without complaining. You've got a long way to go before I trust you enough to entrust you with a real goal. Donkeys are much sturdier than a little thing like you and will help you travel faster. I will get a donkey, don't worry about that. I'm sure it's going to be much nicer than you and its conversation will be more interesting. Donkeys don't speak, the spirit guide sighed, rolling its eye until I could see nothing but white orbits. Which proves my point. Miss, ellipsis, are you well? It was a small voice. I turned to see a girl of about 9-year-old with brown braids resting on each of her narrow shoulders and big blue eyes. She seemed uncertain, borderline scared. Oh, hello, I told her, smiling. Who are you talking to, miss? The girl asked. I looked at the spirit guide. They were still there, beaming at me. You could have told me other people can't see you. The smug bastard grinned. He actually glowed with pleasure. I felt murderous as he took a false innocent air. I suppose I could have, ellipsis. I also suppose I could have mentioned you don't have to speak out loud to address me. Dummy. You simply have to think. I can hear your thoughts. And, ellipsis, by the way, good luck. I bet killing me will be the greatest challenge of your life. The creature blew me a kiss before disappearing. How dare they? I schooled my face into a pleasant expression before returning my attention to the girl. It didn't seem to help, but well, she probably already had her mind made of. She was certainly wondering what kind of lunatic had landed in her family pond. Are you all right, miss? She asked once more in what amounted to the greatest deed of courage a 9-year-old should ever have to pull. Yes, certainly, I answered. It's just that, ellipsis, people usually use this pond to drink, ellipsis, we have tubs to bathe in the barn, ellipsis, you can even have warm water. Oh dreamers, it seemed I'd made a fool of myself once more. I swiftly jumped out of the pond and pulled on my tunic. The stupid spirit guide had reappeared behind the girl snickering. I had to pull up tremendous efforts of willpower not to glare at them. They were floating right behind the girl and she would certainly take my furious stare personally. She was already to the brim of tears. I certainly couldn't afford to scare her once more. I'm sorry. I didn't know, ellipsis, of course, I'll have a bath in the tubs, ellipsis, with warm water. Who doesn't love warm water? This will be amazing. I was babbling, trying very hard to ignore the spirit guide and ease the farm girl at the same time. She was curling a tip of one braid around her wrist, biting her lower lips nervously. What's your name? I asked, trying my best to be civilized. Marissa. What's yours, miss? Ellipsis, people call me Fairy. You're not from anywhere around here, she astuciously remarked. Are you one of these adventurers? One of? What do you mean? She wasn't fearful anymore. I saw pity in her blue eyes as she looked up at me. There are many adventurers passing by every week. They come to trade for donkey and continue south in their quest. I believe they are trying to accomplish something very extraordinary. To be honest, they all look a little lost and confused the first time they come around. So that's why I wondered, ellipsis, but, ellipsis, usually, adventurers don't have pearls in their hair, ellipsis, they look, ellipsis, they look. She hesitated, chewing at her lower lip, trying to come up with a word that wasn't offending. I took pity on her and spoke out the truth my spirit guide has been hammering into me for the past few days. They look like mighty warriors. She looked relieved and offered me a shy smile. Yes, I suppose they do, she said. But, ellipsis, you know, miss, I don't think you're unworthy. Ellipsis, it's just that, ellipsis, you're kind of unusual. I gently tapped her shoulder and smiled. Don't worry. I'm used to people not believing in me. It never stopped me from coming through. Sure, I'm sure of that. Come on, miss, the dubs are over here. Then, once you're satisfied, I bet my dad will be pleased to trade with you. Donkeys are the best. You won't have any trouble with any of them, no matter which one you choose. So there I was, a few hours later, bathed, hydrated and rested, with a belly full of food, hitting the road with my new friend, Henry the donkey. The evening wind ruffled the high herbs in the surrounding fields, making a soothing hushing sound that eased the feelings I was holding against that strange spirit guide. Fortunately, Marissa's dad had cued me onto my next destination, so I hoped I wouldn't have to deal with them for a good deal. Henry was of much better company, shaking his head and twitching his ears as I told him how much wandering in an unknown land with the barest hints of what to do or where to go was exhausting. I spilled my heart to him, and never did he insult me or pass snarky comments about my personality or manners. We were almost at our next destination when the vile creature reappeared 5 centimeters from my face. Wake up, little lady, a tree orc is coming, to get you. They were right, of course. On our right, clambering between the trees, the monster was heading toward Henry and me. I jumped off the saddle and patted my only friend's neck. Stay back, Henry. I'm taking care of our guest. You better go back to your farm, boy. There's no way she'll manage not to die, I heard the spirit guide mumbling before disappearing. Well, this spirit was wrong, obviously, since I'm still here to tell our story, was it? Now that I've went through all kind of adventures, I see them less often. They're pestering me with some vague announcement about leveling up and offering me coins, or they're warning me about upcoming monsters, but that's almost all they do. We're still not friends and they still think me unworthy. Except that now, I don't care, because I have Ergoth, my friendly neighborhood flame dragon, and also a whole clan of friends I can hang around with. I still have some scores to settle with the creature though, and I intend to keep my promise to end the sorrowful thing. We'll see, sooner or later, who's worthy. Close story scroll pop up. Emeralds and obsidian 1, Emerald 1, 2, the fighting lizards, caught tab bar, caught 2, the fighting lizards. A story by Corrine. I still can't clearly explain what sort of magic is regulating this world. What kind of power make it so that the small fishing raft I bought in Barncombe Seaport can grow large enough that a full-grown flame dragon can sunbathe at my side as I fish, rod in hand. As usual in Avalon, the weather is beautiful. Our raft is gently rolling with the waves, and the soft wind playfully ruffles my hair. The only noise are Ergoth's deep peaceful breathing and the rigging clanking almost politely, as if even that sound saw the importance of not breaking the peace. I've travelled the beyond, met Ergoth, and together we worked on building the mobile portal to travel to the infinite. I was having a warm meal in Ganadon's when a rumor came to my lovely pointy ears. Adventurers were discussing over a dice game. They were talking about a new place some of them had heard about. Atlantis is full of mystery, one of them was claiming. Imagine, sunken, city, treasures, gold, silver, 5 full stops, maybe even unknown magic. Eyes shining with greed, his companions were hanging at his words. I was mostly interested because lost civilization usually rhymed with hidden knowledge, and I love knowledge. There's only one problem, the adventurer was saying. Frankly, he looked kind of cute. I could tell this was the kind of man who fought with grace and precision rather than brute force. His obsidian staff matched his elegant swift style and fine clothing. Sipping at my bowl of cider, I was all ears. What's the catch? Asked his friend, a dark-skinned female with the biggest hammer I had ever seen. You must slay 1,000 sharks to diffuse the magic that hides the place. Then, you need to find the actual location, because it's nowhere on the map. On which map does it appear? A shaggy-haired man with the shoulders of a flame troll asked. I've heard it appears in the beyond, staff guy answered, elegant hand rolling the dice casually at his turn. I win. You always win, grumbled Troll Shoulders, shoving silver coins on his side of the table. You only say that because you always take 2 big risks that makes you loose, added the girl, pushing her own bet toward her friend. There was no way you could have won with the 13, even I beat you. Continue about this new place. Staff Wielder reached out for his beer and sip. I don't have much else to add. I've already began slaying flame sharks and I'm wondering if the risk of facing these guys is worth the price. I mean, they are pretty tough and 1,000 sharks makes for a lot of sushi. What if we could obtain the same results with regular sharks from Phonotasia? Maybe, Hammer Girl said. But Phonotasia sharks are boring. They are so delicate. I still think I'm going to try, Staff Wielder mused. You do that, then. I'm going to stick to flame sharks, Hammer Girl said. The first to find where it is helps the others get to it. I doubt it works this way, Staff Wielder replied. But if I see it first, I'll be sure to point you 2 in the right direction. He was scratching thoughtfully at his 5 o'clock shadow, dark blue eyes looking way beyond the inn, his mind probably already in Atlantis. Staring at people and intruding in private conversation is very impolite, little lady, spirit guide whispered in my ear. They were leaning against my table, invading my space. Since I began traveling through the beyond, they had changed their appearance to look like a flame wizard. Red robe with flames sticking out at the sleeves and down the hem around their feet, hair like blue flames poking out in all direction and smoking amber eyes. They probably thought they looked fierce and dangerous, but to me, they mostly looked like an overbearing teenager that tried too hard to be intimidating. I am simply enjoying the scenery, I whispered, hiding behind my cider. Oh, I'm sorry, ellipsis, it really looked as if you were intruding on worthy adventurers, conversation. They were trying to urge me to lose my temper and make a mistake that would make me look stupid and clumsy. The overbearing creature enjoyed when I got my lovely behind kicked by thugs or soldiers whenever Ergoth and I came to a town to trade. I finished my cider and got up, ready to leave and maybe, who am I kidding, certainly head out to the sea to hunt sharks. Ignoring the spirit guide, I walked right through their translucent figure, intent on not letting them embarrass me anymore. But the creature wasn't done with me. As I was passing along the 3 adventurers table, the spirit guide appeared right in front of me so quickly that I jumped, mistaking them for a waitress. Walking through a spirit was mostly uncomfortable, kind of coldish and disorienting, but overall, it was harmless. Smashing right into a serving girl with a tray full of beer mug was another story. So, my reflexes took control and I sidestepped, ellipsis, yelping like a squeamish teenage girl, right into the good-looking warrior's lap. Oh, ellipsis, drank a little too much, staff guy asked, stabilizing me. Oh, by the great dreamer, now would be the time to teleport me back to the Anirium, please. Ellipsis, I blushed right to the top of my pointy ears and jumped back on my feet, alarmed. Hammer Girl and Troll Shoulders laughed, clearly enjoying my misfortune. I glanced around quickly to find something to defend myself and suddenly, I saw, oh miracle, a blue tail pointing out from under the table. I bent down to pick the creature up, beaming at the three adventurers looking at me with mixed emotions on their faces. I missed a step because I didn't want to squish this lovely fellow, I said, petting the water lizard's blue head. I think you got lost. The creature was curling lazily around my forearm, blinking at us and scenting me with its fork-like tongue. Troll shoulders groaned, avoiding my eye. Magnus, you lost your water lizard again, asked Hammer Girl. How many times do we have to tell you it has to remain caged when not in the fighting ring? At least, it's the water lizard, not the Phi one, blue-eyed staff wielder commented. Remember last week in Avalon? Dolly burned a whole shipment of feathers. True, Hammer Girl said. You've made such a mess, we've been forced to pluck chicken and geese for the past week. But Wally enjoys looking around so much, weakly argued Troll Shoulder, who happened to be named Magnus. You should make sure your other lizards are safely in your inventory, his friend suggested. Look who's lucky, Spirit Guide leered into my ear. I bet this will change soon. Yes, Rupert, ellipsis, Magnus sighed before pulling his bag out from under his chair. I am Letta, Hammer Girl introduced herself to me as Magnus was searching his inventory bag. We weren't really laughing at you, earlier, you know. I'm sure you weren't, I said, trying to act as if I believed her. I am, ellipsis, Farah. I had to settle on a name. I had noticed, throughout my journey that people thought my name was strange. So I chose another, that felt more human. There weren't a lot of humanoids like me around here. The only pointy-eared creatures were orcs and goblins and I stood out well enough as it was. So, to avoid uncomfortable questions which I had no satisfying answers to, I adopted a plain easy name. Nice to meet you, Farah, continued Letta. Magnus and I were laughing because Rupert took the good looks he tends to attract a lot of unwanted attention when traveling. We've been hanging out with him mostly because seeing men and women trying their best to get close to him is really entertaining. We've seen a lot but I have to admit that your stunt was the best so far. At this very moment, I hated her. Rupert was doing his best to ignore Letta, scratching at an invisible stain on his sleeve while Magnus was pulling loads of food, equipment and ice crystals out of his bag, still trying to locate his fighting lizards. I could feel myself blush furiously once more and focused my attention to the water lizard named Wally. It wasn't a stunt, I argued rather sourly. I saw the lizard on the floor. Leave her be, Letta, Rupert said. I've had an invisibility potion right before we entered the inn. If she had intended to flirt with me, it wouldn't have worked. Ah, I got it, Magnus said, straightening with the cage in his big hands. Oh, ellipsis. Magically dumping all his food and stuff in his inventory bag, Magnus placed the empty cage on the table between the beer mugs and the dice game. I thought he looked rather pale behind his beard. Well, looks like you have a problem, my friend, Rupert said. At this very moment, a scream came from the bathroom hall and the wall erupted in flame. Looks like we found Dolly, Letta commented. People started toward the door, trying to escape the flames, shoving each other and making the panic rise in the common room of the inn. The innkeeper was yelling, trying to get people to calm down with no great results. I was shoved toward the table once more and Rupert barely caught me before a warrior, large like a bear and carrying a hammer trampled me. I still have to find Woody, moaned Magnus, clearly agitated. Well, hurry, let us Pat. Try to think of where it could be. Letta, go upstairs and make sure everybody gets out before they get injured or dead, Rupert ordered, calmly. Magnus, find your lizards. I'll try to organize a chain of water before the roof collapse on our heads. They jumped into actions, completely ignoring me. I still had the water lizard though and it gave me an idea. Let's try to be useful, little fellow, I told Wally the water lizard. We'll find your warrior once danger is avoided. Jumping on the table, I looked around and planned a path toward the bathroom hall. Once I had a good idea of where to go, I began jumping from table to table, catching myself onto the wooden rafters, avoiding panicked patrons. I didn't know much about fighting lizards. I didn't own any because I was against forcing other living beings to fight to earn money. Each time I caught one of the 3 types of fighting lizards, I usually freed them back into the wild, hoping they wouldn't get caught by another adventurer. I was sure of a thing though, water lizards could produce water. My only problem was that I had no idea how to convince Wally the water lizard to use his water power. Would I have to squeeze it like a sponge? Or tickle its belly until it spat? I had no idea. I shouldn't have worried though because as soon as Wally saw the flames eating the inner wall of the inn, it began growling and hissing and in less than 5 seconds, the water lizard was shooting water. I just had to direct the spray where it counted and avoid being hurt. Well, that's clever, Rupert commented, appearing beside me. Thank you. A scream pierced the chaos, catching our attention. Oh dear gods, Rupert groaned. There's a girl stuck behind the flames. I thought she had escaped. We need to get her out. Ellipsis, I'm not sure I can. I'll do it, Rupert decided. Just hold on to this will you? He placed his staff at my feet and prepared to throw himself through the flames. Wait, I cried out. Quickly, I removed my cloak and threw it in my inventory, making sure to hit the reserve of water. I realized it worked only when I pulled it back out, dripping. Hand me your cloak, I said. I'll drench it too. Then, you'll be protected from the flames. Without arguing, he executed himself. By the time I was done drenching the cloaks, Wally the lizard had reached the limit of his water power. Here, Rupert said, handing me his own blue lizard. Be careful, it's not as gentle as Magnus Wally. Cover me, I'll go get that girl. I did just that. This new lizard didn't take much convincing to begin shooting water. I dumped Wally in my inventory, right in my water tank. There was no way it would still be drinkable after I dunked 2 cloaks in it, so it'd get to be useful to the lizard. Using Rupert's fighting lizard as a water weapon, I tried to think of a way I could get the water in my inventory out so it would be useful to fight a fire. I doubted that pulling it out cup by cup would be a good idea. I knew it had entered in buckets, but for a reason, it never came out this way. My mind halfway occupied by the water lizard on my left forearm, I tried to pull out a full bucket anyway. I nearly fell off my table when, instead of a bucket full of water or a cup, Wally turned up, with its belly all distended by all the water it had absorbed. I grinned as I pointed it toward the flames. Looked like I had found a way to use my stored water after all. I might just keep the next water lizard I fish, just in case of fire emergency. Rupert reappeared, carrying a small figure wrapped in his cloak. Healers had arrived from the nearest shrine and took the girl from his hand. He waved their offered healing off and came back to me. I handed back his lizard who'd just returned from a trip to my inventory swollen with water. What happened? I've never seen it that full since I caught it. Dumped it in my water tank. I could see he didn't understand what I meant, but kept his questions for later. The flame were mostly under control, but we still had some work to do. When we finally gathered back, in front of the inn, Magnus was crying over the charred body of a wood lizard, its skin crisp. Dolly nearly killed Woody, he explained. Ellipsis, I will need to go to the woodlands and have him rest before I do anything else. It's okay, Letta told her friend, trying to reassure him. Woody will be fine. You're going to feed him all the bark and sap he needs and he's going to regenerate himself. Just remember to keep Dolly in her cage next time. Yes, ellipsis, I will. Wally helped fight the fire, I offered, unsure of what to say. He's been a very good boy. I reached out, so that Magnus could recover, his water lizard friend. Returning both the fighting lizards and his inventory, Magnus dried his tears and looked at the inn. How deep in trouble am I? He asked. Rupert shrugged casually. None. We've kind of covered for you. Plus, since water lizards did most of the firefighting work, the innkeeper is not too mad. Just, ellipsis, stay out of town for a while. Yes, I will. I need to get to the forest anyway. I'm going to see, Ledger announced. I still have sharks to slay. Let's us hope our next meeting will be less, ellipsis, hot, ellipsis. Yes, let's hope, Rupert said. He stood there, looking at me. I shifted a little from foot to foot, my cloak still wet from the dunking it had to take. Ellipsis, I still have some trading to do, I mumbled. You're a strange woman, Farah, Rupert mused. Me, certainly not. I can't believe I'm the first one to think of using water lizard to put out fire. Well, I certainly hadn't. I bet it's going to be the new best thing to do now. Tavern owners and innkeepers might just begin keeping water lizards just in case. Rupert began making his way toward the coin market. Since I just told him I had to trade, I had no choice but to follow him. I fell into steps beside him, trying to control my shivers. Ganadin's throne was freezing, this time of the year, ellipsis, or was it all year long? It seemed as if it was always cold when I visited. At my side, Rupert was shivering too. I've never seen anybody use their inventory bag as you did, he said, glancing at my bag. Oh, I'm sure I'm not unique, I said airily. I mean, these things are magical. I probably stored enough wood in there to build a whole house. Plus, I have, ellipsis, well, I had, because there's no way I'm drinking this, anyway. I had enough water to dig my own lake. Yes, I think I have that much too, he acquiesced, but, what I mean is that you managed to throw 2 cloaks, one after the other, right in the water space, then you dunked water lizard many times until the fire was completely dead. This is not how usual inventories work. Oh, I suppose I'm unusual, then, I lightly answered. I hated when people pointed out I was unusual. I tried to find an excuse to leave, but he was trailing along and I was really looking forward to get to the market. I could stop by one of the fireplace and have a warm cup of chocolate before freezing to death. Flaming orbs only went so far when you were going around with wet clothes. We finally got inside the market. Luckily, it was way too noisy to have a proper conversation. I made my way to the warm beverages stand and ordered a big mug of hot chocolate. As I pulled out my coins, Rupert reached out over my shoulder and paid the shopkeeper for both our drinks. It looked like I wouldn't get rid of him that easily. I watched him glance around before grabbing the 2 mugs and making his way through the crowd toward 2 seats next to a corner fireplace. I had 2 choices. Either I put myself back in line to order another hot chocolate, or I followed him. Since I could barely feel my feet, the choice was easy. People were trying to step in his path, beaming up at him and reaching out to touch his arms or cloak. As soon as he arrived at his chosen destination, people bent over themselves to make sure he had the best place. I was flabbergasted. He put the mugs on the low table and swallowed a potion he'd just pulled out of his inventory. I live mostly on invisibility potions, he commented. I arrived here with the curse and I just can't get rid of it. I sighed. Personally, I thought he was good looking, sure, but this degree of charisma seemed a bit too much. I commented so. Oh, sure, you can't understand because you took notice of me when I was under a potion and with friends. The curse won't have any effects on you. But I swear it's true. Ivan, ellipsis, I think it's related to the life I used to live before being dragged into Phonotasia. Really? Do you remember anything? Not really, but the spirit guide who welcomed me told me I had to pay for past mistakes. Oh, at least, they don't spend their time glowering at you and explaining how stupid and incompetent you are. Well, she can be annoying sometimes. I was under the impression this last comment was directed at his spirit guide because he was glancing sideways at something, or someone I couldn't see. I looked around and didn't see my own spirit guide anywhere. So, how about you tell me how you did it? Putting the cloaks and lizards in your water compartment. He jumped right back into the subject. I would, ellipsis, I began. But I can't. Don't tell me it's a secret you can't share because it would mean my upcoming death or something like that. No, ellipsis, I mean, I can't because I don't know. It just works. I think about it and it happens. Oh. He remained silent for a while, observing me, probably trying to decide if I was lying or not. I watched him back, rather content to have a warm drink in a warm place with pleasant view. We didn't say much else afterward. This had been a strange day. I just hope the innkeeper will be able to fix his bathroom hall soon. I could smell the smoke on my hair and clothes and was definitely looking forward to have a nice warm bath. Maybe I should ask Eragath to fly me to the nearest village. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. He didn't really enjoy Icelands anyway. Would you join my clan? Rupert asked, as he stretched, having finished his mug. Maybe we could keep in touch, just in case you finally understand how your inventory works. I shrugged. I was halfway tempted to reject his offer, especially if all he wished was to crack my secrets. But the truth is that I liked him. He hadn't hesitated to ran through the flames to pull a victim out and he seemed like a nice person. And also, I enjoyed making friends. It had been very lonely so far. Even if my clan was full, people were very quiet, minding their own business. What does it involve? I asked. We meet once a month, usually in Ganadin, although it may change in the future because of what happened today. Basically, it means that we keep in touch, trade information and support each other. Sounds interesting, I said. Accept. Good. See you then. And as simply as that, he tapped my shoulder and left, making his way among the crowd until I could no longer see him. 7. Actions homepage. Library. Hints. Light travel. Library. When selecting Emerald. 1. 2. Call to the sunken. Call to the sunken. Call to the sunken. A story by Will. Of times long gone in darkest sea, the sunken city, it beckons me. Beneath the sleeping cold of tides, the beast, Leviathan, opens its eyes. Its army surround it, 1,000 strong. Its body of water and flame stretch long, invading my dreams with crawling tune that dares me to challenge, for glory or doom. The villagers, tremulous, whisper its name. Death demon shark, great Leon's bane. Atlantis long hidden, its stolen deep throne, by sea wind was captured, to keep as its own. I call to you now, adventurers all, make haste ye and pass the 1,000 shark wall. To quest long awaited, by dawning depart. We must free Atlantis from foul demon shark. Obsidian sword, cactus fruit stored, our shield to the battle, our blade to its mark. Tab bar. Close story scroll. Close story. Called. Tab. Called to the sunken. Called to the sunken 2. A story by Will. Now it came upon a twilight dawn, in the midst of winter's hand. A day of myth and story gathering, mustering there from every land. A time of valor, a time of might. A time of deeds reborn once more, where heroes bold of every walk, campaigned upon abyssal shores. There loomed the champion, brimming with brawn. There stood the plated knight, stalwart and strong. Battle mage and alchemist, high magics they wove, and quick-witted bar gave rallying song. Rogue, hidden shadow, put poison to blade, ranger carved arrows, his swift deadly rain. Physics defying amongst blinding skill, and fleet-footed fencer, her sword like a flame. Tinker or tailor or soldier or sailor, arrayed in their splendor as eldritch shark's bane. Now there came a brassy report, our rising note of brazen horn, and lifting from the cloaking mists, our ramming prow from metal formed. Like a great sword poised to strike, propelled by 4 broad oaken masts, from fairy light and high, steel-shaped, the dragon ship, the Teneblis, its size, an island, untethered to Rome, enchantment gave it north wind's speed, adorned with iron dragon head, with gaping jaws to fire unleash. By the captain's casual signal, projected from the glowing ship, a bridge of rainbow light unfurled, and under jagged shoreline gripped. Ahoy, ahoy, come haste and board, if ye be brave enough to try. At the tolling of the silver bell, we sailed to battle, unafraid to die. Out upon the stormy seas, a dark armada gathers its strength, 8,000 frenzied sharks there swarming, to bar our way by any length. At the captain's throaty calling, came grounds-bound heroes, 2 by 2, a last-minute check of armor and arms, then the ship swung about with a nod to the crew. Yet others had won the allegiance of dragons, and into formation swiftly pursued. Onward through the seas they stormed, cloaking fog by dragons hunted, till on the horizon a sight was seen, from which came uncanny sounds of thunder. What comes? What comes? An archer cried, with her bow to the ocean brandished. I see a mass, a moving mass, like the shadows made solid to ravage. It is our foe with 1,000 jaws. The captain's poke, grim-faced, raised bows, aims spears, and ready Vic Tenebris's flame. A sudden thrum came through the deck, as on the rigging sailors toiled. A glow emerged from great ship's mouth, that promised the icy seas to boil. A moment then came, of absolute stillness, a tension that waited to break. Then fire erupted, and lanced through the air, and the ship's ram soared in its wake. Heavily, it plowed, through the gnashing mass. Fanged beasts, dashed aside like stones. Yet round the sides, they tried to board, in hopes of ripping and mangling bones. But onto bristling spears they dove, and wall of blocking shields, over which the arrows flew, like stars in heaven's fields. Overhead, on strathing runs, the living dragons sped, their very breath, authority, commanding foes to yield. Yet still the maddened sharks, came piling, unending in their numbers, that gradually were wearing down, the will of defenders haggard. But now, a gap through the swarm, beneath the churning tides of battle, revealed like the vision of a dream. The hiding spell now unraveled. Atlantis lay beyond the gap, the ocean jewel of ancient days, long laid to rest by demon master, shark of flame and ocean graves. Swiftly, before the shifting door was covered, from swirling skies, 3 dragons dove. Upon their backs, 3 legends rode, to face the final deadly foe. First through the waters, with shield raised and ready, was Quinta Kyanaya, the blade of the north. Storied in battle, and fairest in heart, her spirit was mirrored by obsidian sword. Second, there entered, Isel of Marauder, the hammer of justice, renowned in her hands. By unicorn spellcraft, blessed with strength, and swiftness to journey between any lands. Third came a battle mage, twirling his staff, Liam of East Cheer, enchanter of domes. Eager to aid, in battle or peace, with magic enough to breathe life to stones. The world around it, the death demon shark, decayed and corrupted, by death magic potent. Its armor was wrought from darkest deep cold, and hellfire it gathered from volcanic vents opened. It reared up in arrogance, a challenging shriek, from hell throat erupted, to claw at the soul. A swing of its tail, a blast of pure flame, and Liam from dragonback headlong was thrown. Rallying quickly, casting a shield, deflecting the fire, up and away. Liam's staff whistled, swinging a blow, to keep the great tail of killing at bay. Usel lunged suddenly, hammer a blur, as strike after strike came down on shark hide. With each crashing blow and earth-shaking force, the great wind was stumbled onto its side. And now plunged Kyanaya, blade to its mark, buried to heal through opening provided. True was her aim, despite the flashing, and clouds of steam as magics collided. Now in final, desperate act, the demon, determined to emerge on top, casted a spell with world-warping voice, and commanded time to fracture and stop. Realizing in horror, the cost of such evil, Liam to clash with demigod's anger, casted encounter, a spell of continue, with strength from companions willingly gathered. And thus came to pass, where time is asunder, and each parallel, a story unfolding. Yet still raging on, the battle is waiting, for you, brave hero, to answer the calling.